Hi, my name is Stephen Rufe, and I'm the Technical Assistance Manager for the Behavior Alliance of South Carolina. Today, I'm going to be discussing using the Classroom Assistance Tool, or the CAT for short, which is a checklist-style tool that you can use tomorrow with an educator. Today's session will follow three different objectives. The first of which is to talk about the 5 essential classroom management practices and connect them to the tool of the Classroom Assistance Tool. The next is to provide some resources, options, and ideas to help you in utilizing the tool and making it feasible for use. And the third is to talk about some resources and give you some tips and tricks to use the tool in a classroom with an educator. Today's session was based off of a quote from Dr. Kent McIntosh from the University of Oregon. Dr. McIntosh inspires us by saying that the strongest predictor of both sustained implementation and sustained improved student outcomes is the implementation of classroom management systems. Today's discussion around the Classroom Assistance Tool will focus on the implementation of classroom management systems with the idea that they will improve student outcomes. Speaking from experience, especially in a large urban education environment in the School District of Philadelphia, we wanted to think about how we can support teacher practice. And we did this through thinking through 3 different lenses and options. The first lens and option was to deliver a classroom-specific positive behavior interventions and supports professional development. Designing this session, maybe for an hour or 2, was really high in feasibility as it's easy to do. We had a lot of ability to design professional development and support from the central office to deliver it. However, we recognize that this fire hose approach to professional development has a lower impact as it relies on the individual educator to turn what they hear into the actual practice. We also thought on the other end of the spectrum about using something like the classroom checkup model. The classroom checkup model is a fairly intensive support for an individual educator that involves cycles of observation and feedback and regular touch points with an educator. The impact of this is extremely high as the educator is getting regular feedback, has cycles for reflection, and is able to change their practice in real time with support from a colleague, a peer, or an administrator. The feasibility of this was very low, however, especially in a large district with tens of thousands of educators. So as a group, we came together and said we needed something that would allow us to have really high feasibility and give us an opportunity for impact. And for us, that was the utilization of the Classroom Assistance Tool for an observation, or what I like to call a classroom visit, and providing that educator with later feedback on how they performed in that 15-minute block. I like to use the terminology visit versus observation because it feels more supportive and less evaluative, and you'll hear me use that terminology for the rest of the session. So at the end of the day, we sat and we thought that this would be the most realistic, relevant, and actually implementable way of getting information about teacher practice and providing support. So let's talk a little bit more about this Classroom Assistance Tool, or CAT. The Classroom Assistance Tool was developed in coordination with Florida PBIS's project and the University of South Florida. The Florida PBIS project is one of the largest statewide projects in the nation, and the general premise in the development of this tool was that the general field of positive behavior support was focusing largely on school-wide implementation, or the creation of school-wide norms, an expectations matrix, maybe a PBIS handbook that everybody was oriented to in the beginning of a school year. After that happened, though, the expectation was that that would translate into teacher practice. And the Classroom Assistance Tool was an attempt to provide feedback on the classroom level to make sure that the practices that are being developed and presented on at the school-wide level come to fruition at the individual educator level. To connect to one of our last Echo series and another didactic that you can explore on your own, this here is an idea around what those 5 essential classroom practices are. And when we look at those 5 practices, we're going to narrow our focus on the Classroom Assistance Tool to 3 of them in the classroom behavior systems. The first of which is expectations and rules, the second one being acknowledging appropriate behavior, and the last is responding to inappropriate behavior. While I won't cover maximizing structure and student engagement, Both of those pieces are covered in the other two sections of the classroom assistance tool. So, diving a little bit deeper into the classroom assistance tool and talking about its purpose is to promote and support positive, appropriate behavior in the classroom in three general categories. The first category is environmental factors, the second is classroom behavior systems, and the third is curriculum and instruction. For the purposes of this short presentation, I'm going to narrow my focus on classroom behavior systems. So, diving a little bit deeper, what is this actual tool? As I referenced in the opening, this is a checklist style tool, and it focuses on three domains of classroom management that are effective in terms of environment, behavior systems, and instructional practices. And it's based off of Marzano, Danielson's work, and the idea of classroom-wide PBIS practices that all educators should be doing. It's also deeply rooted and connected to the South Carolina Teacher Standards rubric. In instruction, we find that motivating students and consistently reinforcing and rewarding effort is a piece of the rubric that is vital to effective instructional practices. We see reinforcement of effort, the reinforcement of a specific behavior or effort. We also see a direct connection to the South Carolina Teacher Standards rubric through the environment domain. And you can see with the pink arrows, there are many areas of the environment domain that are connected to the classroom assistance tool. Some of these areas relate to inappropriate student behavior, like you see at the bottom with attending to disruptions, while others talk about acknowledging student behavior, like consistently recognizing and motivating students' positive behavior in the classroom, and also providing some rewards, intrinsic motivation, approval, and things that allow for that engagement and promotion of a positive classroom environment. So, when diving a little bit deeper into the classroom assistance tool, let's talk about who it's for. It's actually designed to be used for individual teachers, as you can see on the slide. And you might be thinking, what? How? Individual teachers? How is that feasible? How is that really going to be used? That seems like a lot of effort and work. Think back to my lessons learned in the field. And when we're talking about working with individual teachers, we're really talking about doing this through two different avenues. The first of which is a short, at least 15-minute classroom visit, or through a self-report. So when we're talking about how this tool can be used, it can be used in a short classroom visit and a scoring from the observer or the visitor, or it could be used and sent out to educators to perform a self-assessment on how they're doing with their practices. This tool is going to be used and shown today in an Excel document form, and it'll automatically generate pie graphs that depict areas of strength and need for an educator. So it's meant to be simple for the visitor to use when observing a classroom teacher. Let's talk a little bit about some of these administration options. I've mentioned two, and I'm going to talk through those a little bit more in depth. Option one is going to be the option that we recommend, which is to visit an educator's classroom for at least 15 minutes. Visiting a classroom is the most effective way to see the practices in action. And really, we're going to ask that folks come to the next echo or on their own if you're viewing this asynchronously, that you take this opportunity to visit a classroom and score the classroom behavior system section, because that's what I'm going to talk about later in this session. The second option, which might be more feasible for you, is to select an educator and discuss the tool and its purpose and ask them to self-rate the classroom behavior systems. Regardless of which option you choose, we have a few general recommendations. First and foremost, you should, at least initially for your first time, select an educator that you have a relationship with. This is going to provide you a safe environment to try a new tool and also provide an opportunity to try it in a lower risk environment. The second suggestion that we're going to make, regardless of outcome, is that you're clear with the educator of the purpose of this tool. It's okay to say, hey, I'm using this tool for the first time. Can you help me learn this tool? And on the other end of things, it'll give me an opportunity to give you a little bit of feedback on your practice. And lastly, we recommend being sure that you phrase this as a visit. It is not an observation. It is not part of how a teacher is being evaluated. And be clear about what you're going to do with the data. i.e. just use it for your own professional practice and your own needs, that the data is not going to be shared back with an administrator. I wanted to just take a quick moment to reflect on the power of connections in using the classroom assistance tool. I'm going to do this by sharing a story. I used to be a district level coach for positive behavior support practices in Philadelphia. And in my time there, I was working with a particularly challenging elementary school, a large elementary school, over 1,200 students, in which there was a particular teacher, I'm just going to call her Miss P, who was struggling with her third grade classroom. I had been around the building, I had been in school level meetings, I had been supporting the school for quite some time, and the administrator asked if I could drop by the classroom to see what I could do to help the teacher. I immediately thought it would be a great opportunity to use the classroom assistance tool, as I'd met this teacher before and talked with her on multiple occasions, and I really genuinely liked her as a person. So I contacted the teacher, I asked her if I could visit, she of course agreed, and as I got to the classroom, it was really just a lot of challenges. There were 6 or 7 students lined up in the hallway outside. The rest of the students in the class were out of their seat. There was a lot of noise. There was a lot of chaos. The classroom was totally unorganized. So it was really just a challenging environment. I sat for my 15 minutes. I made my observations or during my visit, and I went ahead and scored using the classroom assistance tool. When I went to go schedule the follow-up with the educator, I sat down and I started talking with her. And the first thing I did was just ask, hey, Miss P, what do you think went well in the 15 minutes I was in your room? And you could immediately see a wall go up, and you could see her expressions change from our cordial welcome that we had at the beginning. And she just kind of said, nothing. I don't think anything went well. And so I stopped for a moment, and luckily I had done my work preparing myself and coming into this session with her. And I had 3 areas of strength that I wanted to share with her, and I asked her permission if I could share them. She had a little bit of a smile on her face and said, sure. And I shared 3 thoughts about it, about her classroom, some of which included really genuinely knowing the likes and dislikes of her students, which was evident in my time in that classroom through some of the things she was saying. After sharing those 3 thoughts, Miss P started crying and broke down. As an educator for over 32 years, the words out of her mouth really startled me. She said there was no feedback that she had ever gotten from anybody in any position of power or authority who had ever given her something positive. She had never heard anyone speak positively about her practice. She only heard critiques or things that she needed to do better. I shared this story because the classroom assistance tool is a tool that we use to help improve practice, but it's also a tool to give feedback on things that are going right and well within a classroom. No matter what level of chaos or organization the classroom has, there's going to be pieces of the classroom assistance tool that will come through as strengths for an educator. And it's important for us to share those back with people as we put relationships first in our work. Diving deeper into the classroom assistance tool, I referenced earlier the ability to use the Excel form or the spreadsheet in order to collect data and populate those pie graphs. Today's session, I'm going to focus on using that Excel spreadsheet, and you can see the QR code to it here, and the pink circle will show you exactly where to go on the live binder to find it. But I'll also acknowledge that the Florida PBIS project has built an app for this that you're welcome to log into and create a free account in order to use in your data collection and sharing back with an educator. If you've gone in and gone to that QR code and downloaded the spreadsheet, on the second tab at the bottom, you'll see a tab for data entry. Feel free to read the instructions, and I encourage you to do so first. But today's session, for the rest of our time, will really focus on that data entry tab, which looks like the following. In addition to the data entry tab looking like this, you'll see at the bottom of this page, the classroom behavior systems in green. That's what I'm going to focus the rest of the session on. The classroom behavior systems, the second section of the classroom assistance tool, has 3 major areas. The first of which is define and teach behavior. The second of which is reward, or as I like to call it, acknowledgement system. And the third section is the consequence system. There's a little bit of a misnomer about positive support practices being all about prizes and posters. And it's important to highlight that the classroom behavior systems has a consequence system as part of what you're going to rate the educator on. Before we dive too deep into the different sections, I just wanted to point out there's these red items here, and I want to say what is with those. Well, if you actually read through the context of each of those items, you'll notice that it's really hard to observe those things. So these are listed in red because it's supposed to be an opportunity for you to interview an educator or ask them to self-rate. So these items should not be scored during your classroom visit. They should be scored in either a follow-up message with the teacher to ask them to self-rate, or even better, in an interview at the end of your observation that you've scheduled with the teacher later. That will give us real authentic data and feedback on these items. Diving a little deeper into that classroom assistance tool, you've already scheduled your 15-minute classroom visit. You're going to take notes during that visit. In my experience, when I visit a classroom, especially for a shorter period of time, like 15 minutes, I actually like to script out what an educator is saying so I can go back and reference that in my follow-up with them. That is certainly an option you can take, but it's also a lot of work, so do what works best for you. When you go to actually use this spreadsheet and score, you'll see a little caret pop up on the right, and you'll see a drop-down list. So you're going to score the educator based on these indicators: in place, somewhat in place, not in place, or not observed or follow-up needed. In this case, you're going to take your notes, what you see and what you hear, and the best educated guess you can make as to which of those three categories, in place, somewhat in place, or not in place, makes the most sense for what you've seen. Going into defining and teaching behavior, or the first section of the classroom behavior systems, you'll see two items to score in black. The first of which, number 17, reads, "School-wide expectations and roles, routines, and procedures are clearly defined, positively stated, and posted." I'll note here the word "and." All of these pieces need to be present in order for this educator to receive the highest score. So when we actually look at the "and," it's not enough to have a list of rules posted up on the wall. You've got to make sure that they are clearly defined, and you have to make sure that they're positively stated. So we shouldn't see the word "no" anywhere in those posted rules or expectations. If we dive deeper into number 17, expectations, rules, and routines and procedures are explicitly taught and practiced. This is where we should see evidence of explicit teaching, i.e. hearing the language. We should see evidence of students practicing those expectations. We should see good instruction or modeling from an educator about maybe how to be safe and push in your chair. So we should see and hear and feel those things being taught, modeled, and practiced throughout the course of our visit. That will allow you to decide how you're going to score number 19. Moving on to the second section, which is the reward, or as I like to call it, the acknowledgement system. There are actually the most items here to score, which are 5, and I'll walk through each of them. So for number 21, you'll see a recognition or reward system for appropriate behavior is in place and implemented consistently. So first of all, is it in place? Meaning, do you see evidence of a token system, a point system, a ticket system, some sort of tangible or verbal language being spoken to students regularly to give them recognition and reward for what they are doing? This might be like using Class Dojo or using PBIS rewards. Number 22, specific criteria are in place for earning reinforcers and students are aware of this criteria. If those criteria are posted in the form of expectations or rules, is it clear that it's being connected to that criteria when a reward or ticket is going out? For example, is there verbal recognition going to a student along with a point, a dojo point, for when they're being responsible and completing their work with their best effort? If that's posted on the wall, the language is being said, and there's a token going out, we can assume that there is specific criteria in place for that reinforcer the student has earned. The second piece is one that I like to do in terms of students being aware through asking a student. If a student gets a point, gets verbal praise, going over to the student and saying, "Hey, what did you get that for?" I will note, though, if you choose to do that, you should make sure that on the front end, you've let the educator know that you probably are going to be talking to a kid or two. You don't want to throw them through the loop of thinking that you're out there whispering to students about something behind their backs. Number 23, all students are eligible to earn reinforcers. For that one, are those reinforcers, the verbal praise, the points, the tickets, are they going out to most students? Or is it only going out to a couple? Is it going out to just the two who are constantly participating or constantly behaving? So it really just goes to, does it look like everybody has a chance in this room? Number 25, reinforcers are age appropriate and accessible to all students. For this one, I like to say two main things. One, is it developmentally appropriate? We're not going to see a paper dollar buck maybe going out to a 12th grade student, right? And conversely, we're not going to see just verbal praise going to a kindergartner who needs more tangible stuff and more extrinsic motivation to start. And then the second part of that is it accessible to all? Maybe there's a random system for selection, like pulling a popsicle stick or clicking on the random feature for Class Dojo. And number 26 is actually one of my favorites. And I always suggest just doing a simple tally of this while you're visiting. And this is that specific behavioral praise is provided more frequently than negative or neutral statements. Ideally, this is going to be in a 4-to-1 ratio, which is what the research says. But ideally here also, we just want to see more praise than corrections going out, or more praise than negative statements. So what I do is I just simply make a tally mark of when there's a praise statement and when there's a corrective statement on my paper. The last section, which is here, remember, it's not just about prizes and posters when it comes to PBIS, is the consequence system. There's 4 items to score here during our visit. The first one, number 27, a hierarchy of consequences for inappropriate behavior is in place and implemented consistently. So here, do we see that there is a hierarchy of consequences, which for us means, do we see that there's a low-level behavior that's getting a low-level response, and then a low-level behavior that happens again, it's getting a medium-level response? Do we see an appropriate step up for consequences as behavior is taking place? And then is there consistency, and is this happening consistently across the visit that we're seeing? Meaning if student A in the back corner is doing the behavior, do we see the same response when student B in the front corner demonstrates the same behavior? Number 28 just really tells us, are these consequences or behavioral responses happening in a consistent, respectful, and timely manner? I like to point this one and just say, is it happening right away? Planned ignoring is definitely one of those hierarchical responses, but is that happening every single time? And then are all the other consequences happening in a timely manner? Are they done respectfully? On the element of respect, when we look at 29, I like to say 29 is our trauma-informed strategy. Students are calmly reminded of expectations and choices. So does this mean that the tone and the volume is appropriate for the behavior we're seeing and the point at which that hierarchy is present? i.e., if a student is not on task, is the response a gentle proximity, a gentle touch on the shoulder, a short, quiet verbal redirection, or is it a yell from the front of the room to the back of the room to a student, right? So we just want to make sure, is it calm, and is it a reminder of those expectations in choices? And then lastly, for 32, which we've sort of acknowledged in talking about our hierarchy, is there some sort of evidence that there are alternate strategies available for students not responding? So do we see multiple consequential strategies for inappropriate behavior? Do we see those strategies used consistently across the board? Does that teacher have a lot of tools in the toolbox? So as we are talking about all of this, I just wanted to give a visual of what we suggest this process looking like. First step, find a teacher to work with, ideally someone that you have a relationship with. Second step, talk to them, get some buy-in, give them an overview of what you're trying to accomplish, and be open and honest that you're learning this process and that they're helping you with this process as well. Step 3, scheduling a classroom visit and actually going to visit that classroom. Step 4 is making sure you've reviewed all of your notes, you've scored based on what you saw. And step 5 would be the next step in this didactic, the next echo session that we have is to go ahead and make sure that you're bringing data to the next echo so we can review the data. And the next in this series, we'll talk about how to review the data for action planning and talking with the teacher. And lastly, the optional step here is to set up a follow-up interview with the teacher for those red items so that you can have the entire classroom behavior systems scored. So For your next video in this series, and for the next time that we come together, you want to make sure that you've done your homework, which is going and using the classroom assistance tool to actually try it out with an educator. And finally, we remind you as part of our community of practice, if you have a case that you'd like to present, we'd love to hear from you about what some of the challenges you're encountering when using something like the classroom assistance tool. And we encourage you to fill out this form in order to submit a case and be a case presenter. On behalf of the Behavior Alliance of South Carolina, I would like to thank you for joining us for this presentation on the classroom assistance tool. I invite you to reach out to me directly if you have any questions about the tool. And I also invite you to be part of our Behavior Alliance mailing list, where we will be sharing any news, updates, announcements, or offerings that we have in the future. Thank you so much for your time and for all that you do on behalf of educators, students, and families and staff across South Carolina.